Welcome to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast all about stories of safety leadership, presented by Dale Carnegie and the Board of Certified Safety Professionals.
So, Jason, a treat to have a friend of yours join us today from an organization that I would imagine many of our listeners are going to be familiar with. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about Anthony?
Yeah, I would love to tell you a little bit about Anthony, and then we'll get into hearing it from the source himself. So I was doing a research project. This was during the pandemic. I had some white space on my calendar. Chatted with about 15 to 20 people or so, and a consistent thread. Of course, I asked them, who should I speak with next? That's a great question. You're going to want referrals. Otherwise, you don't have any type of process moving forward. And consistently, they said, there's this guy named Anthony Miller. And he's at Sunbelt. He's high level. He's an executive. And he's healthy. He's well. He's a father. He's a husband. He's a senior leader. He thinks like a business professional, but he's got a safety and health. And I was like, okay, sold. So I had a conversation with, of course, Anthony, and we hit things off. And I think most importantly, we're excited to give our listeners an idea of how Anthony, quote unquote, does it all as a senior executive, a husband, father, and yet maintains and prioritizes so many other things in his life. With that, Anthony, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jason. It's good to talk to you guys, and thanks for that intro. I mean, I'm just a country boy from Kentucky, who tries to outwork the next person. But I'm glad some of the colleagues in the field think so highly of it. I appreciate that.
Well, a guy from Kentucky. I'm from Kentucky also, Anthony. So we're brothers in a way, right? So, Anthony, just tell us a little bit, how did you ever get intrigued into safety?
Well, I guess my answer, I'll be as transparent as I can. Being that country boy from Kentucky, I went to college, Murray State University, went to university, and everyone told me, said, hey, man, if you want to get a job, you ought to join the safety department. You ought to go for a safety degree. And, I wish I could tell you there was some big epitome, and I've always grown up wanting to help people and, different things. Of course, I did, but it was all about the money. It was all about the job. And I saw other people who had degrees like in print management or history or humanities looking for jobs. And I saw all these folks in the department getting jobs right out of school. And that was how I found it. So I joined a fraternity, and like 75% of them were safety, going for the safety degree. So I was like, hey, why not? And that's how I got into it. And, it's one of those things where it luckily worked out. During my internship, unfortunately, there was a fatality.
Wow.
And I was on site helping with I was there, giving CPR and doing the root cause analysis and working with OSHA. And it just kind of clicked in my head that, hey, luckily, you kind of stumbled into this, but it's the right thing for you. So, again, I wish I could tell you this big grandiose story, but that wasn't necessarily it. I just wanted to get a job right out of college.
And Anthony, you are not the first person who has ever told us that on this podcast. What did that do to your heart, your mind, your soul, seeing that fatality take place in the workplace?
It was kind of falling into things. I fell into that internship. My dad was a lineman at this particular location, this rural electrical co-op. And the internship was kind of not structured. I would go out and I would work with the crews, the line crews. There was not a lot of safety involved in it. And I was on my way to work with that line crew. And when I pulled up, the event occurred, and it just kind of rocks you to your core. And it lets you know that no one should get injured at work. No one should have a family go to a hospital to visit someone who was injured, and coworkers shouldn't have to go through that. And there's like 3 generations of my family that are electrical linemen, and every one of them have a story about somebody who got killed or somebody whose fingers blew off or those type of things. And there's no need for it whatsoever. And that really stuck with me, and it kind of let me know, like, hey, I'm not the smartest safety professional. I wasn't the top of my class at Murray State University, but by gosh, if there's one thing I could do, I could talk to people.
Yes.
I could talk to them, and I could not necessarily, I could talk to that lineman, or I could talk to the individual who's running that co-op and let them know this is all preventable. You can stop all of this real easy. And so it just really shook me to my core. And I think about it maybe once a week in my work, thinking about how that particular thing really changed my life as a safety professional.
And it seems simple, what you just said, that I can talk to people. What does that do for individuals when we talk to them and we just highlight things and we bring it to their attention? Anthony, again, we get so complex sometimes in what we do, and we got to sometimes. But tell us just that simple effect that has on folks.
When you can relate to someone, even from a like, I report to the CEO of our organization, and I have to get into a state before I talk to him and our executive team. It's in a different state than what I would be out in the field. But when they expect, when they see folks like Jason or myself, when they hear a safety professional is showing up, holy cow, you mean to tell me the safety cop is coming, that type of stuff, that stigma that we live up to. But when you can get down and really just talk as humans, and it's not, and some people say, well, you got to, and it's just, you got to be human. And when we can take safety from a textbook and from a standard and compliance, and we can just put it into human nature for our team members out in the field, you see it click. And a lot of it comes with just knowing that, hey, listen, this is the last thing they want to hear. I'm the last person they want to see out there. But when they can see that I'm really, truly, I care about them getting home each day, it's a different type of connection you get versus when you show up there and you get your laptop out of your bag or your clipboard and you start going to work and you start knocking out your checklist.
I believe there's a stigma that people in safety have to overcome.
I've told folks in the past, and I relate to family stories a lot. My grandfather, I told him, I said, yeah, I'm going to Murray State University up here, and I'm going to get a degree in safety. He said, so are those the guys or gals that put the little smelly things in the toilets at work? And he's joking, and I get some people, they get a look on their face like, your grandfather said that to you? But, he was joking. But that's the stigma that we as safety professionals are facing. And I told myself as I was working my way up, whether if I was on a project, I wasn't going to be that project safety manager that everybody hated. I was going to get my job done, but I was also going to be one of those individuals that had an incident-free environment. And I told myself too, if I ever worked for an organization, over a safety team, over, our mission vision from a safety perspective, it was going to be something that related to our team members, and everybody wanted to be a part of it versus everybody wanted to push away from it.
And a big part of that is that the work we do is serious, but we have to be careful we don't be over serious about ourselves in our minds. And you seem like you were able to work through that.
Well, it's a grind daily. It's something that I put in a lot of work with. Our team members put a lot of work in. And, like I would say 80% of my job is taking the package and making it sellable, if that's a word. It's making it where someone out in the field can absorb it and it makes sense. Not giving them a piece of paper to read every week for a safety meeting topic that nobody cares about. Everybody in the room is not saying anything. They're thinking about what they want to do, but giving them a video that they watch every week that really appeals to what they're doing. And it's their team members talking to them, little things like that, where we can, again, my grandfather, it's the 6 inches between your ears. That's what we're trying to get a hold of. And what we're, just really what we're all about, just trying to figure out a way to take the message and make it, absorbable where they could soak it up from our team member perspective.
Anthony, you referenced that, 80%, give or take, 80% of your job is related to taking information, making it digestible in a way that people can absorb it and soak it up. And I remember this 3-4 years ago when we first connected, is you sharing the weekly, I think it was, videos that Sunbelt does that does just that. Some people call them micro learnings. I think it's a brilliant term. Tell us about how you've done that at Sunbelt and why it's so effective.
Yeah, so we would have every year at Sunbelt, we have a thing we call Safety Week. Construction has it in May. We would have ours in October. But anyway, what we would do is we would get together, and I should say first and foremost, I have a very dedicated and very cutting edge group of individuals behind me doing all of this stuff. Sometimes I just have the crazy idea, and they're the ones who load up the wheelbarrow and push it. But we were saying, hey, during Safety Week, we want to really address what's going on inside the organization. We want to be very relevant at this given point in time. And we would do that. We would develop videos. And so wherever you guys are at right now, I would bet my next 4 paychecks, there's a Sunbelt location within 15 minutes away from you. And so every one of those Sunbelt Rentals locations, there's a TV. They have a TV where they do different things. They look at their orders, their fleet on rent, different things, but they can also plug in their computer and they can watch videos. So we would take advantage of that during Safety Week. And after Safety Week, we noticed our injury numbers would go down for a couple of weeks. We would have a pretty solid tailwind. And so we said, how can we recreate that? Well, we have an individual on our team who's now full-time. He's a production specialist. He is out in the field videoing every day. Right now, they're in Dallas, Fort Worth filming. And so all of our topics are filmed by our team, and they have our team included. It's not, a figurehead like me or anyone else. It shows a yard tech. It shows a mechanic. It shows a driver, loading and unloading, doing things that we know could hurt us. And we present that to our team every week. And every Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, one of those locations that's 15 minutes away from you, they get together as a congregation. That's the Kentucky kind of part of me coming out, but as a congregation, and they watch their safety topic. And so we spend so much time on getting these things relevant because we've seen, after we've rolled these out, we saw a significant downward trend in our lagging events, the severity and frequency. And so everybody loves a story. What's the Mr. Perfect or Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank? I watched a clip with him not too long ago, and he said, the most important individual in his business is the production specialist, because that individual can help tell the story. And that's exactly true on our safety team. All of our 70+ safety professionals in the organization are so important, but that production specialist takes those stories and presents them to the business, tells that story. And that's all life is. It's a story, what we're trying to tell. And so it's been hugely beneficial, Jason, those videos and sending them out, and it's become extremely popular. And if we were to go back to that PDF that everybody reads that nobody listens about, it would be like going back into, the horse and buggy.
Yeah, you use a very specific word there, Anthony, and that's relevant. And I think people need to understand this, that in the world of social media that every single one of us are living in, is that if you're not quickly relevant, you're immediately scrolled, which means you're irrelevant.
Yes.
And if you're not entertaining or different, you're irrelevant because you get scrolled past. Tell us this, because it's fascinating how you've reduced incidents, severity, and frequency. How do you decide on the topics? Because in a business as complex as yours, you could pick anything. How do you decide on the topic of the video?
It's really what's going on in the business. What are we seeing, feeling? I mean, we have the fall protections. We have the ones, the confined space, lockout, tagouts. Those, we have those, and we'll put those on every 3 or 4 weeks to really focus on those. But it's what's relevant in the business. As a safety professional, we all tend to see trends and we think about, well, okay, we need to develop a policy or procedure, or we need to get a procedure out in the field. As soon as we realize, and I think this is where I think I made a shift. Nobody wants to read a policy or procedure. Nobody, nobody wants to read a standard. So take all of that information and put it in a topic. Put it in something that you can consume in 2 minutes or less. And I was just at a store on Monday, and our team members were just telling me what all they had a chance to see. And we also try to see what's going on inside the social climate that we're in. Like a good example is we talk about exposures. It's all about exposures for us. Like, where's your exposure level at right here? And so you're familiar with Monday Night Football with Peyton and Eli Manning. Oh, yeah. I love it. Anytime I see them on Monday Night Football, that's who I'm going to watch. But what we started talking about was we need our team members to understand what exposure means. I was like, well, let's do it in a Monday night football format. Let's have a team member perform a task, and then at the bottom of the screen, we'll have an exposure meter and have some individuals walking the rest of the organization through. Hey, this is what Jason's doing. Jason's loading a 19-foot scissor lift on a job site. There's power lines right here. Oh, Jason's getting underneath those power lines, so his exposure's going up. It's that kind of stuff. And man, it has caught on like wildfire. The store I was at on Monday, I go, what do you want more of? And two of the team members says, we want more of the exposure meter. It makes so much sense. And so that's just trying to figure out what's going on in the industry as well as what's going on outside in their heads, in their homes, so we can tie the two together.
Anthony, as you know, we work to incorporate the Dale Carnegie principles into what we're hearing. And there is a principle that you were talking about here that he said, dramatize your ideas. He said, giving truth is not enough. You have to put it in a way that so it's not dead truth, but where people get it. And what you've done is you've taken, instead of that dead PDF, which is probably not a good way to say it, but lifeless, your organization brought life to ideas. And rather than people go, oh, yawn, they got it. They got it.
Well, it creates engagement is what it does. And that's what all of this is about. You know, I talk about, well, it's all about the story, but it's also all about the engagement. And when you can have your teams engage, and it's more than just, you know, reporting near misses, it's more than just attending safety. When you can have them be engaged all the time, want to be one of those locations that we film at. And when they see it, they're listening. It shows up so much, not just in our safety lagging numbers. It just shows up to an engagement. It shows up in the culture, in the DNA of that location. And to be quite frank with you, it's a lot easier to identify non-performers in this kind of environment. From a culture perspective, once your bar has been raised like it has been, it's a lot easier to see a team member or a team that aren't participating like the rest of the organization or the rest of the culture would like them to.
Anthony, you know, generally speaking, there's kind of two types of leaders. There's the visionary, the person that's always like, what if? What could we do if this? And that's kind of your style from what I know about you. And then there's the integrator, implementer. They're not what if, they're like, how do we? And the visionary piece of you says, we need to do this, but then the production specialist says, this is how we do it. Every safety and health professional that's in a leadership position would go, I need a production specialist. But maybe they're getting pushback because they go, no, you only hire safety and health professionals. How do you help people? What would you tell our listeners? How do you get someone like a production specialist? Because you're right, you can't do this alone, Anthony. There's no chance. Yeah. But you can hire people that are experts in their craft. How did you get that done, and what advice would you give to our audience?
Yeah, you have to show, and this is the world that we live in. You have to show the ROI. You know, you have to show what the benefit is going to be. If you can say, okay, well, after this specific safety week, we lowered our lagging indicators, we increased our leading indicators by this much. We know that if we continue this kind of trend, or even a third of this trend, it's going to be beneficial, and there's a cost savings associated with it. And so that's where, you know, folks like myself or you, Jason, we have to step into that selling role to our executive team members and say, hey, this is the benefit that it's going to bring to the organization. And also, it's easier now for our team members on a safety meeting perspective. You know, they're not having to read and be challenged by these topics sometimes that are hard. You know, these things aren't easy to talk. Lockout, tagout. Can you imagine somebody talking about lockout, tagout when they don't necessarily are familiar with the standards? So it's giving them that topic and saying, hey, here's a football for you. Kick it. That's all you got to do. Just read it. Just hit the play button, but also engage with your team members. And inside those videos, we also have a leader's brief that's for the leaders as they're presenting it. So it gives them the why behind it. But yeah, it's not an easy ask. And you know, you just show the ROI. If you can go back and say, this is how the organization is going to benefit from this. And plus, everybody loves to say, oh, technology, AI, and all this stuff, we're using all of that. I talked to a company not too long ago. They're using all this AI with cameras and different things. And, you look at kind of how they're doing some of their safety meeting topics. It's like 1975. It's still the same stuff. And so, I think everybody loves that shiny penny. With AI and technology, every Sunbelt employee has a cell phone, which is great. But sometimes it's kind of looking and saying, hey, what are the blocking and tackling things that we're doing? Can we do them better?
Yeah. Anthony, you referenced earlier in the call, you referenced the term state. And I don't want to just step over that, because when you're in a front office state and you're trying to sell an idea, that's a very specific state. And you're one of the most effective people I've ever met in our profession on how to be an effective state when you're trying to influence at the CEO senior level. And then there's a front line state, which is very different. So tell us about your state when you're in the front office trying to influence versus when you're in the front line trying to understand how work gets done each day.
Yeah, so I think from a state perspective, I am more myself when I'm out in the field. First and foremost, that's me. I'm out in the field. I'd rather be getting my boots dirty. But you have to really get yourself into the idea, the frame of mind as to what's going on in their head when you're talking to them. When you're talking about selling this production specialist and they're like, oh yeah, Anthony, that's great. We're going to have videos and stuff. But really what some of the folks are thinking, okay, well, what's our injury numbers going to look like? What's our workers' compensation spend going to look like? And you're also going to have some team members you're not going to need to convince. But when you get out in the field and you talk about the exact same thing, you just want to hear their feedback. You want their input because they're the ones who do the work. They're the ones who know how to really get stuff done safely. So you're going to go out there and you're going to ask them, what could we do better? Here it is, here's what we're doing, but what do you want to see? What do you want to do? And you got to understand too, that you're not the most important department in the world. I think I have met safety professionals who feel like they're the most important safety professional in the world. We're not. There's other departments within an organization, and we have to be integrated with them. But we also have to just realize that, leadership, there's 1,000 things coming at them. Folks in the field, there's 1,000 things coming at them too. So you have to be relevant, and you got to figure out how you're going to get your message to them in, 45 seconds or less in a lot of cases.
Anthony, of all the people that we've spoken with, and I think of you and I think of a lot of hats. And you've already referenced so many different hats, yet you do it so effectively. Tell us how you manage, and we kind of started with this. I don't want to say manage it all because nobody manages it all, but you wear a lot of different hats and you do so effectively. How do you do that?
Well, it's having a world-class team, and it takes time developing that world-class team of individuals behind you. But I hire the right people and I somewhat cut them loose, and I let them hire their team members. I think I have probably like 8 direct reports. And underneath them, there's, 50, 60, 70 individuals. And I let them, I give them feedback. I'm kind of like just a little voice on their shoulder a lot of cases. This could be very controversial as well. I don't hold weekly calls with my team members as a group. We do occasionally. We do a bi-weekly like injury review. We do things like that, but I don't require a travel report from my team members once a week. If I don't know where they're at, something's wrong. So I try to create a team to where everybody just knows the mission. Everybody knows the vision, and we're all pointing in the same way. We're not micromanagers, and a lot of the things that I'm saying and telling you, those team members, my team's like that. But we also have it, there's a book like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book. There's people that love to ride the motorcycle, and there's people that love to work on the motorcycle and ride the motorcycle. I don't like to work on the motorcycle. I like to ride it. It's the same kind of thing. We have team members. It's kind of the yin and yang, where you got people like me that are kind of thinking the ideas. You got other folks that are like, how are we going to do this? Is it going to, can you actually do it? Those type of things. But it's really hiring the right team. And it takes a while to get that team really moving. And once you do, man, it's an organism. You know, our team, I feel, is an organism that now it's like you can't penetrate it. We know the mission, and every one of those individuals on our team know how I feel about leadership, know how I feel about, hey, the buck stops with us, you know, that type of stuff. So I think that's behind every good leader. There's a team who knows the mission and also is really grounded in reality.
Yeah, we had a former CEO who he used to say that you hire good people and then you let them do their job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he would say, because if you put a fence around people, you get sheep. That's kind of like the punchline of it. It's like you give people the freedom, and that's what I'm hearing. And like you said, it might be a little bit controversial, but what I'm hearing is it works for you and it seems to work for your team. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it does. You know, and it's a team that allows operations to develop their own script. You know, you put 10 individuals like myself into a room and they're going to say, this is how you bake the cake. This is how we want you to do it. Do not deviate. But our operations, you know, if we've got 20 some odd regions, we've got, 15 plus specialty lines, everybody does something different. So the ingredients are the same for that cake, but some folks use a little bit more of this than they do of this. And you have to be comfortable with that, and you have to get rid of the ego. You know, I think for the most part, I try not to have an ego. Every morning when I wake up, I walk myself through being humble with the team and I hope our team members do that too. Our safety team members, you can't let the ego get involved. You have to understand the mission, and somebody's going to do that different than you do. And you got to accept that. And then you got to support that from them. You have to be supportive of somebody doing something different, but it's the same goal in mind.
In some ways, you have had to do, it sounds like some of the things you've done, you're willing to be different than other people, other organizations. The idea of the videos, the idea of how you guide your team, no travel reports. Some folks would be terrified that, what? I don't know every detail. Talk to us just a bit about, there's folks listening out here that are trying to be so cookie cutter just like everybody else. How do you help those people to say, use good judgment, be yourself?
Yeah. Well, in case anyone at Sunbelt is listening, I do know where my team members are traveling. It's just that I talk to them every week, so I have a really good sense when I say team members, direct reports. But I think it's more and this is going to offend a lot of individuals, but I try to think the way that traditional safety professional would attack something, and I kind of do the opposite in a lot of cases. Now, I know that's going to rub folks the wrong way, but being, working like I have my entire life and kind of being around that stigma of a safety professional, I don't want to be that.
Yes.
And I've tried to be different. I just really have. And maybe it's an inside game inside my head, something my grandfather told me when I was, 19 years old. But I try to be that individual that folks want to reach out to, that folks want to pick up the phone, that executives want to have on their team to say, hey, listen, this is who I want to walk with shoulder to shoulder if I've got to face this. This is the individual I want to sit next to if I'm in a dinner, that kind of stuff, versus being somebody who's going to talk about fall protection or confined space at a function, that kind of stuff. I just want us to be that group that makes sense to the team members out in the field, and they understand exactly what we're trying to do.
And Anthony, sounds like not only the guy they want to sit by at dinner, but when the chips are down and we're in a mess, this is the guy I need to go to. They'll get me somewhere than just by saying pious platitudes, but we'll really go after things.
And Anthony, what you've reminded me of, is I think it's actually a Charlie Munger principle who unfortunately just passed away. He called it reverse thinking. He said it's one of his principles for success in life. You think about, okay, how do you have a successful marriage? That's how most people think. But he would go, how would I have the worst marriage on planet Earth? He'd go, well, I probably would never do date night. We would never talk. And when we talk, we'd only talk about myself. And I'd probably have, and he did that, and then he just did the opposite. So what you're doing is reverse thinking. I actually think it's brilliant. And where I see Sunbelt doing, I believe, is you're reverse thinking around managing data, leading and lagging indicators, and then also leveraging some software systems to make sure that you're focusing on the right things and driving the right things. How are you doing that? Tell our audience a little bit about those two things.
Well, one of my favorite movie is Moneyball. I've watched it probably, it's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
When it comes on, I stay on Moneyball. But what's interesting in Moneyball is that, there's numbers. And I'm not trying to take people and turn them into numbers. I'm not trying to do that. But with 1,400 plus locations, 1,400 plus leaders, 12,000 people that are touching steering wheels, 7,000 professional drivers. If you want to manage safety, it's all about data and it's all about consistency. And so I mentioned every one of our team members has a phone. And so we've created and we change these every year, but what we call our performance predictors. These are leading metrics that team members can participate in our safety program that we feel drives that outcome. And again, this starts with a team. I have got and I'm not going to give names because, folks will try to poach them, but I've got some individuals on my team that are fantastic when it comes to taking all of this data. We know that 2,500 plus individuals a day get on their phone and enter in safety information inside Sunbelt. And so our team members take this data and they put it into dashboards to where we can, I say we try to predict where the next event's going to happen, but it's really looking at engagement. And we can even see who's pencil whipping things. We can see who's not participating. And so, these are all too often we would maybe have an injury at a location and somebody said, man, I have no idea what's going on. We're talking about safety, but we want to see what you're doing about safety. And so that's where data analytics, having data scientists on your team come into play for us. And so I think it's a little bit different. Everybody talks about leading and lagging metrics, but we can give you leading and lagging metrics. Those locations that are 15 minutes away from you, I can tell you in 15 seconds where they're at on their performance predictors. And we incentivize based on those lagging metrics. We incentivize based on safety meeting attendance for our team members. We incentivize on those things. And so we're just trying to figure out, hey, what's the good stuff that can kind of go in the tank that can really predict what their outcome is going to be 6 weeks, 6 months down the road.
And you referenced the word engagement earlier. So it's all about stories, all about engagement. 2,500 people entering safety data each day. That's engagement. How did you get there? How did you create that type of environment?
First of all, you got to give them a tool that's easy to get into. And so we have that. They can access it on their phone or they can do it on their laptop or PC. But we require it in a lot of cases. Whether it's an incident, we require incidents to be reported within 4 hours. If it's a near miss or proactive event, we require these things to be in. And also that location that's 15 minutes away from you has a safety coordinator at that location. And that's, their job. They could be an equipment rental specialist, but they're also a safety coordinator. So they're helping enter that information in there at a time.
Anthony, I think you said stuff that can kill. Was that a Sticky reference?
Yeah, it is. So the guys that made up Sticky, I was in the room and, I didn't like Sticky. I like stuff that can kill. We were going through the same serious injury and fatality prevention transition in our organization. And, kind of getting back to the 6 inches between somebody's ears. A driver for us doesn't care what serious injury and fatality prevention is. I mean, that's the freaking $1 million statement. But they do know what stuff that can kill is. And it's easy to associate what the stuff that can kill is. And, and it gets them away from that zero harm, zero injury kind of mindset. I mean, I was part of one of those, zero injury, in an organization. It's crap. You have people out in the field, you're going to have events. So it's the big ones. And you hope that your attention on the big ones, I shouldn't say hope, the attention that you place on those big ones, that's going to reverberate through the entire organization. But again, our efforts from a safety perspective, we call it the stuff that can kill and the stuff that can hurt. Majority of the time, we're talking about the stuff that can kill.
Yeah, and the stuff that can kill, no question at Sunbelt, 12,000 vehicles on the road. How do you prevent stuff that can kill? How do you prevent SIFs, right? The serious, the bad things, the big things. How do you prevent those? You
create the best version of a driver that you can, and you work with those drivers to become the best version of themselves. It's tough. It is so tough on the road. Our exposures on the road, it's, we have a system of cameras now in all of our service and delivery vehicles. And you're looking at over 7,000 cameras. And what our drivers are facing day in and day out it's unexplainable, what they see on the road. And all we can do is really change the behaviors, get those individuals into a better position. It's not if, but when something happens, they can react accordingly. And that's what having those cameras, the exoneration from all those cameras that we're seeing. But it is so tough. Journey management plans, thinking about where you're going to go every day, thinking about your distance. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens out there on the road. And then, by the way, you've got a trailer load of gear that you're taking to a job site that you've got to think about as well. So it's a very tough job for our drivers day in and day out, but it's providing them the relevant information immediately and also just making them a better version of themselves. I was in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago talking to a driver, and he said, those cameras that you have in there, of course, nobody wants to have a camera in their vehicle. We turned it off facing them. But he said, the beeping, you guys must have done something to the volume because the beeping has gone down. I go, no. You're becoming a better driver.
Wow.
And he said, oh, yeah. And I've had individuals tell me, hey, my wife's noticed that my following distance better when we go out to dinner and things like that. And so that's why we're trying to change the behaviors. That's why we, have telematics and we have tons of things inside the vehicles. It's the behaviors, and it's to protect our drivers, protect our team members, and the general public.
That's like another principle. You praised the slightest improvement. You praised every improvement. And that guy, it dawned on him, didn't it? Yeah. You're getting better. You're getting better, which is good for a wholesome individual to realize I'm taking steps forward, and it's good for me, it's good for the public. See, these kind of things, Anthony, are game changers for people. And for all of us that get stuck in the ruts and stuck in, it's got to be this way, it's got to be this way. What would you say to those people that are stuck?
And I look out the window as I say that. I tell all of our team members, they have to have an outlet, to look out the window. I call it looking out the window time, or whether it's running, or whether it's biking, whether it's fishing, whether it's getting in a car and driving. You have to have an outlet to where you can think about, to where you can vision, is this what I want? Is this what the organization wants? I think a majority of my good ideas come out while I'm riding a bike or running. I think those individuals that feel like they're stuck in a rut, you got to think about it. You got to think about, is this the right location? Is this the right organization or leadership team for me? And what do I want to be like in 5 or 10 years? Do I want to be like, the other 75 safety professionals that I met at a conference? Or do I want to be someone who people are like, man, I remember when I worked at Sunbelt Rentals, they did this kind of stuff. Yeah. That's what I think people need to think about and kind of get out of their own head. I got to get out of my own head once a day, to really think about what's the mission and vision at hand.
And a part of leadership is what we're hearing from you, is that ability to not only say, do this, but they see you do it, and they see you encourage it. And so they are hearing that this is the way we want our place to be. And that is leadership, to help people see what can be and to encourage them and to reinforce that along the way. So that's what makes it so effective.
And you know this, we know this, safety and health professionals are so focused and so passionate about the work that they do, or they often fail to actually take care of their own health. And that's not healthy. Because you know this, when your health improves, every single other aspect of your life improves as well. They're perfectly correlated. And something that you referenced is an outlet that people have. You get a lot going on in your life. What are some of your outlets? And then what would be some encouragement for you to others on simple things that they can do to improve their health?
Yeah, your health is going to be important to you one of these days, one way or another. And, you know, from my perspective, I was into that rut. Like 2010, 2011, I was like 240 pounds, which is a lot for me. Traveling around, I was, you know, flying at 200,000 miles a year, eating whatever, doing whatever, wasn't exercising. And it caught up as that light switch went off for me that something's got to change. And once I realized that I could exercise, like I run and I ride my bike all the time, as much as I can, it's changed my life completely. completely. And you've got to have that. You've got to have, and I understand some folks can't run 10 miles, some folks can't run 5, but if getting out in the fresh air, getting out walking, not having that, and this could offend some folks, not having that, 2 or 3 beers a night when you go out and you're traveling, just really focusing on sleep. Once you focus on sleep, man, it's a game changer. Get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Do what you got to do. Skip that beer at the dinner that you're going to, or wake up early in the morning and do some deep breaths. All of that stuff, it's reflective, and it makes you really think about what's happening. It's changed my life significantly. This past August, I did a 100-mile mountain bike race, and 7 days after, I did the Leadville 100 run. Never thought I could be able to do it, but I'll tell everybody on this call, you can do 100% more than you think you can right now. Your knees might be hurting, or you say I might not be able to walk. You can. You can do a lot, and you've got to have that outlet. It's so important for folks to have that out the window time, that time to sit there and think about life and to meditate on what things are going to look like. What do you want your team to look like? What do you want your organization? What do you want your relationship with those leaders to look like? And if I haven't had that outlet, I don't know where I'd be.
That's so good. And I think people hear, oh, this guy, Anthony, EVP, running 100 miles, biking 100 miles within 7 days. Like, yeah, but when you were 240 pounds, I bet you it started with getting outside for 10 minutes in the morning and going for a 10 to 15-minute walk, right? You got to start somewhere. And consistency, your habits will always beat intensity.
To wrap up our time, what would you say to people if you could sit across the table and just give a word of encouragement or challenge to a professional? How would you wrap it all up?
I think it's what we do matters, and it's not just about the 22,000 individuals that work for that organization. It's about their family, and it's about those individuals. And I go back to it, that fatality that I was a part of. I think about the music that was played at the funeral. I think about seeing the procession and those type of things. It's what we do matters. It does. And don't be cookie cutter, because your team members, your workforce, they're not cookie cutter. You've got to challenge yourself, and you've got to challenge your team to be different, because individuals performing work now are doing it way different than they were in 1985, 1995, 2005. So you have to challenge yourself. And if you're just trying to check the boxes, so be it. Maybe you don't need to be a leader. Maybe you just need to be a doer. But I think for those individuals that want to lead, they're going to have to think about that. You're going to have to challenge yourself and know what you're doing. It's a matter of life or death in a lot of cases. And you've got to approach it with that kind of intensity.
Thank you, because we want this to be an opportunity to take what you've learned and let other people hear it and be challenged, because they face safety challenges just like you do. And this is an opportunity for each one of us to say, let's learn and let's step forward. So thank you so much for being with us.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot. And hey, we talked a lot about me, but I wouldn't be who I am without the people that I learned from, without the team members that I worked with on those projects that showed me all of these things. So just like to give a big shout out to all those folks, and they know who they are.
You got it. A speaker like we haven't had before, Jason. Anthony was saying some things as times controversial. Rock the boat, baby. One thing he said that stood out, he says, we come up with ideas here, and then certain people load up the wheelbarrow and push it to make it happen. And we need the idea generators. We need the people to put them into action. What'd you take?
You said it, rock the boat. And sometimes we've got to row the boat, and sometimes the boat needs to get rocked. And I appreciate that. My biggest takeaway from Anthony was he said, you want to be different in our space. And I couldn't agree with him more. Like we talked about previously, serious injuries and fatalities not moving for decades. It's time for us to be different and for people to find out what's going to work for them so they can influence and they can send people home better than they came.
And that's our challenge for everyone that listens. Take a step different. Don't be satisfied with just, this is the way it always is. Even sometimes we just get plain lazy. And let's be aggressive, assertive, and go after it. to help our people and to take good care of ourselves.
Thanks for listening to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast produced in partnership by Dale Carnegie and BCSP, with your hosts, Dale Carnegie Master Trainer Merle Heckman and Jason Coons, Global EHS Team and Culture Activation Lead for 3M. Executive produced by Charlie Eltringham. Supervising producer and editing by Michael Escobedo. Directed by Michael Escobedo, Joel Burgai, and Giachi Liu. Graphics by Giachi Liu. Editorial support from Brendan Mohawk. Consulting producers are Colin Brown and Mark Sullivan. To have new episodes delivered directly to you, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. If you would like to share your story of a safety leadership challenge you faced, email us at info@mybigsafetychallenge.com. See you next time.